welcome once again to our program. My name is Chris with Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined by Cleet Bolsom. How are you doing, Cleet?
Doing fine.
Great. Before Cleet starts our program, I just want to talk to you a little bit about summer reading. We're in the middle of summer reading right now, and the theme this year is Oceans of Possibilities. We have a lot going on. We have reading challenges, virtual and in-person programming, prizes. There's a lot going on. So we invite you to learn more at hcplc.org/summer. And again, you're here for our program this afternoon, Secrets of Hillsborough River. And I will introduce Cleet in just a moment before he presents. And just a few other items we'd like to cover. We'd like to thank our partner, the Tampa Bay History Center, who partnered with us on this great program. And lastly, we'd like you to continue the experience after the program. Here's a book from our collection. It's called The Hillsborough River Guidebook by Kevin M. McCarthy. You can find out about this book and more of our books at hcplc.org/books. All right, I'm going to turn off my screen and introduce our guest presenter today. We have Cleet Bolsom, who is a volunteer docent with Tampa Bay History Center.
Very good. Well, good afternoon. Oscar Hammerstein, 2 years back, wrote a song about the river, the Mississippi River. And so how about you just join me in the first few lines of that, okay? Let's sing along. It goes like this. That old man river, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. Well, in the same way, the Hillsborough River just keeps rolling past Tampa every day, but silently, I would add. So, since old man Hillsborough won't tell us, we're going to tell a few stories and secrets about what that river has seen or heard over the decades. So away we go. First, let's just cover just a very few facts. As attested to by this sketch from a balloon back in 1895, the river has been a highway of growth ever since day one. The source is the Green Swamp, which is a 900 square mile area east of Dade City. And the river then comes out of there and meanders past Pasco, and Polk, and Hillsborough counties, and finally past the city of Tampa. It's 59 miles long. It's anywhere from 2 to 16 feet deep, but the 16-foot depth would be highly exceptional. It's named after the Earl of Hillsborough, who was the colonial secretary from Great Britain during the period of British control from 1763 to 1783. Our journey of stories is going to take us from the mouth of the river upstream. So here we are, to begin with, right at the mouth of the river, we see Fort Brooke. You all know, I believe, that Florida was acquired from Spain back in 1821. And by 1824, the federal government wanted to establish a series of forts in and around the territory, and one to be in the area of what we now know as Tampa. So the task was given to somebody by the name of Colonel George Brooke. And he located an area right at the mouth by the bay, and in 1824 began construction of the fort. But before he did anything else, he communicated back to the War Department and said, I have found a great place for this fort. It has, it's got high ground, it has shade trees, it has clearings that would be suitable for cultivation. So he was really pretty high on the area. The one thing he neglected to mention, though, was that there was a vacant house already on the area. And it just happened to belong to a chap by the name of Richard Hackley. And Hackley had purchased 11 million acres of Florida land from a Spanish duke prior to the time that the property was all transferred to the United States and Spain. Well, the courts disallowed his claim, although it took the Supreme Court to do that, and not until 1904. So here's the first secret that the river observed. This was probably the first of many, many, many Florida real estate deals that went sour. And the second secret I can tell you is that the base medical officer declared that no more than 14 men could use the same toothbrush. So I don't know. Maybe that explains why we have a goodly number of dentists in Tampa today, right? Now, we all are very familiar with Plant Hall, back then, the Tampa Bay Hotel. It was so beautiful. It was built on the Hillsborough River in 1891. It was the most luxurious hotel, certainly on the west coast of Florida, and some would argue Florida in general. It exceeded anything in luxuriousness. But there was a popular cigar maker in Tampa, and he decided that he was going to make it look even more luxurious. And so here we see the label that you couldn't help but notice as you opened the box of Tampa Life cigars. And there it is back there, the Tampa Bay Hotel. And you're looking at it over on the west side from the east side. And notice that on the east side, we have nice sandy beaches, beach umbrellas, lounge chairs. Folks have been swimming, canoeing, even instead of tennis and badminton. So it was just a very, very lovely place. In fact, this is what you saw from the hotel as you look to the east. That's the secret, how the east really looked at that time. So as you go upriver a little further, and you can kind of orient yourself in this picture with the bridges that are named there. And up at the top, you see what is now called Columbus Drive, the bridge there. Well, that huge area, pretty much from Columbus Drive to the south in this picture, almost to the south, around the cursor is, those little lots are in fact places for trailers and cars. So you may have heard of tin can tourists before. Tin can tourists are those middle Americans, middle-aged, often from the Middle West, that with the invention of the car and some better roads started pouring down to Florida at any chance that they could get. They were called tin can tourists because they would load up the car before they came, not only with their bedding and their tent and other camping supplies, but a huge, huge box full of canned goods to subsist on partially while they were in Florida. So that's what their name was derived from, tin can tourists. Well, they descended on Florida in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it was a big, big number. But I had never heard before of the Tampa Municipal Trailer Park. And this place really is a gargantuan facility, or it was at the time. It had space for 645 trailers and 1,200 cars, plus a couple of really good-sized community recreation type buildings, and of course entertainment venues throughout the time that folks were likely to be here. That was the Tampa Municipal Trailer Park. And you see some other features that are interesting on this particular aerial photograph. If you can see my cursor coming down from the Michigan Avenue or Columbus Drive Bridge, and then the Garcia Street Bridge, which was replaced over here by the North Boulevard Bridge in the 50s, and then down past the Fortune Street Bridge, and all the way down to the Cascade Railroad Bridge right here. And looking at this picture, you see the top part of the Florida Fairgrounds, now of course part of the University of Tampa. And right to the north side of the railroad tracks here, you see Phillips Field. And that was a favorite place for college games to be played in high school plants in Hillsborough High, for instance, and even stock car races around the field here. Now the secret is that now and then, periodically, a stock car would lose its way and end up in the river. So a bit of a secret the river had no choice but to observe when that happened. Our next stop is at Rivercrest Park. Now, Rivercrest Park is on North Boulevard. If you were to cross Kennedy on North Boulevard, go up through the University of Tampa, all the way up, cross over MLK, within a few blocks, the road dead ends into the river, essentially. And it dead ends now into this lovely little park, Rivercrest Park. Well, I tell you, I'm obsessed with the fact that of what this park was formerly used for this land. And a friend of mine by the name of Paul Lean and I were just kicking around Seminole Heights there one time, and he says, "Boy, this is just one of my places I remember as a kid, because there was a vacant house here, and there was a rope tied up in an oak tree, and he said pardon me, they said we would swing off the roof of this vacant house, and we just had a great time. Then we'd jump off the rope. Well, he said what we did too is to increase the excitement, we tied a tricycle to the rope, so we'd ride down the roof on his tricycle and then swing out and jump off. I thought, well, that's interesting from the point of view of what dumb things kids will do. But he said he referred to the house as the pest house, and that really caught my attention. And so here's where this secret unfolds. It turns out that with yellow fever and smallpox epidemics in the 1880s and 1890s in Tampa, the city council and the county commissioners got together and jointly financed a facility. And here's a little script from the Tampa Tribune, October 2nd, 1897. And it says, Mr. Dombrowski, who was the chairman of the city council, informed the council that the special committee acting in connection with Chairman Dwelly of the county commissioners had secured a suitable building for a pest house, and that the property would be purchased as soon as the papers were drawn. The property in question is on the Hillsborough River, some 2 miles from the city, and consists of 10 acres of land and a story and a half house. And the price agreed upon is $550. So here's how one of those houses looked at that time. And here's another. You see the river in the background. And then you see that they had certainly a nice sized vegetable garden. And it appears like this was the day the doctor was visiting the facility, perhaps. You see his car there, and it's like a young girl out there to the left of the car. Well, the State Board of Health took over the facility in about 1903 and ran it for a few years there before they opened isolation hospitals down at Mullicky and also down by Gadsden Point. At that point, then, the city had rented some of the houses for a while, and eventually they were torn down. And we have this beautiful park today. Our next stop takes us a little further up the river, and we'll talk about the Scottish Chief for a minute. Now, during the Civil War, the Union Navy blockaded much of the Confederate states that were fronting on waters, and the Tampa area was no exception. So the Union never had any need to occupy Tampa, but on one occasion they heard about the fact that one of the blockade runners had a couple of boats up on the Hillsborough River, and so they decided to go and attack those boats. Now the two vessels, one was called the Scottish Chief. It was a wooden steam-assisted boat. And the other was a schooner, the Cape Daly. Now, that's not a picture of the Scottish chief because nobody has a picture of the Scottish chief. I'd love to find a picture of it, but nobody's been able to. But anyway, the Union forces landed at Ballast Point, and they marched up the west side of the river. Of course, by now, of course, it was in darkness. And when they got to the point where the boats were moored, they found that they were on the wrong side of the river because the boats were on the east side and tied up there. And they were all loaded with cargo, just really ready to go down to Cuba as it was. And they, of course, were loaded with things that they would trade in Cuba for ammunition and supplies, so war-type supplies. And on the other hand, they were also going to get another product from Cuba that was very important. You may guess what that was: cigars. So our friend James McKay wasn't in the area at the time of the attack, and what an interesting character he was. He was a mariner, he was a cattleman, he was a salt works operator, he was a mayor at one point, and the patriarch of the McKay family. So he brought quite a resume to his task of running the Union blockade. So anyway, to get back to the soldiers, how could they get across the river to attack the boat? Well, there's the secret. They simply asked. It was dark. They had one of the local sympathizers with them who called over and said, "Hey, send a boat over. We need to get back to the boat." And so they sent a rowboat over, and of course, the Union Navy troops rowed across and attacked the ships. It burned both of them down to the waterline. It wasn't until the 1960s that the remnants of these boats were discovered in the muck down in the river. That brings us to Sulfur Springs. The banks of the Hillsborough River on both sides in this area just littered with natural springs. And most of them now have been capped. Some were capped intentionally to increase the water pressure from other existing springs, and others unintentionally by simply debris and used appliances, and even in one case, an automobile. But these sulfur springs were quite large, and it became a very popular resort in the early 1900s. And it had just a beautiful park, swimming pools, a dance pavilion, boating, tourist cabins, restaurants, even an alligator attraction, and eventually a two-story arcade with hotel, apartments, and shops. It was so popular with the locals too that the streetcar tracks were extended from downtown Tampa up to Sulfur Springs to facilitate folks getting up there. Even the tin can tourists found that to be a favorite place also. So they were camping out in the area also. So while other areas around Tampa, particularly Pinellas County, were catering perhaps to more wealthy vacationers, Sulfur Springs provided a great vacation place for the working class individuals at the time. Now, the landmark in the area is the Sulfur Springs Water Tower, and it was built to provide water to the various venues at the park. It's 214 feet tall. It could hold 200,000 gallons of water in the top 1/4 of the structure. And unlike the Tower of Pisa, this tower is built on bedrock, just below the surface, so it should never tip over. Although the guy who took that picture may have been a little tipsy, it looks like it's swinging over to the right a little bit. And of course, I'm the guy that took the picture. Now there is a secret about Sulfur Springs, but we're gonna talk about that the next time. So there is a dam in the Hillsborough River. Did you know that? It's called the Dam by a lot of people over the years. Now, the first dam, there were a series. The first dam was built in this location, approaching the area around Rowlett Park, a little north of there. And it was a good place to build a dam because the river is shallow here and very hard rock bottom. And the remnants of this first dam have been located in the river there. There's disagreement over the purpose of that dam, but obviously it did flood upriver grazing areas. And so the thought is that it was perhaps the cattle men who might have objected to that because it was flooding the grazing areas. Well, by 1896, an improved version with a spillway was built a little downriver from the first. And it was built to generate electricity. And of course, it really flooded the area. And so in 1898, it was mysteriously blown up. And the cattlemen were, of course, the suspects, but nobody was ever indicted for that little act of terrorism. So Tampa Electric Company bought the facility and repaired it and used it to generate electricity for Tampa. And there's a facility. However, by 1933, it was pretty much outmoded and damaged by a flood. And so its use as a power source has ended at that point. And then by 1947, the city of Tampa needed a new source of drinking water other than the springs and wells that had been relied upon. So a deal for a swap was struck with TECO, and essentially the city got the dam and the reservoir, and TECO got exclusive rights to supply electricity. Now I mentioned a little known secret about Sulfur Springs on the previous slide. Here it is. You see where the white water is bubbling up at the left end of the click of the dam. And that is actually water that is being piped up from Sulfur Springs. And it can be adjusted in terms of flow, depending on the solidity of the river below the dam and other ecological factors. But so quite an effort there Sulfur Springs is performing to essentially freshen the water flow of the river and mitigate some of the effects of the dam. In summary, some would say the dam is still the dam because it affects ecology. But on the other hand, bear in mind that if you live in Tampa and you turn on your faucet, some of that dam water is coming to you by way of that particular facility. Our next stop is up around the Temple Terrace area. And here's a secret. Temple Terrace, the area was visited in 1757. Now that's 60 some odd years before Fort Brooke. And of course, the area had been visited back in the 1500s by Navarros and the Sulfur. But this map was made by this individual by the name of Don Francisco Maria Sully, and he was the chief pilot for the Royal Spanish Fleet. And it's just an amazingly accurate map. Now, the confusing thing, though, is back in the 1700s and even prior to that, maps were often made or oriented with the east to the top. So the north is over here on the left side. So to get a better perspective from today's view that we're used to seeing, you kind of have to bend your head over your right shoulder and make the picture so that in your mind turn up. And then that long area that's sticking down here is the Interbay Peninsula. And you see the Hillsborough River, this black snake-looking thing that's winding its way up here. Just an amazing map. And of interest, so also all the other things that have been added to the map. Look at all of the trees, because all of the European powers were always looking for wood for any number of uses, one certainly for the mast and the sailing ship. But the animals that are annotated on the map are very interesting too. Almost makes you laugh. There's a snake, an alligator, a wildcat, a deer, turkeys, a cow, a bear on hind legs, and an Indian village. So it's a fascinating map. By the early 1900s, Temple Terrace was part of a 19,000 acre hunting preserve owned by Bertha Palmer. And she was the wife of Chicago millionaire Potter Palmer of the hotel in Marshall Field Springs. Now, Ms. Palmer was a big believer in Florida. She also bought 80,000 acres near Sarasota in 1910. So by every measure, she was a big spender. She loved investing in real estate, lots of art, the best jewelry she could find in the world, various mansions. She loved to travel, and of course, a clothing wardrobe that wouldn't stop. So here's the secret. In his will, Potter Palmer specified that a sum of money should go to whomever next marries Bertha after his death. When asked why he should be so generous, he replied, because he'll need it. As for the property on the Hillsborough River, it was sold to a developer after Bertha's death in 1980. Did you know that Tampa is surrounded by a moat? Oh, wait, gave away the secret. Yes, yes. If you consider that back in the 1950s and 1960s, Tampa and Temple Terrace experienced terrible river flooding. It was very rainy time. Hurricane Donna came in the beginning of the 1960s, and about 1,500 homes actually had to be evacuated. So in the 1960s, they decided that they would build a way to prevent these floods. So if you start down here at the bottom here, downtown Tampa, Tampa looks like an inverted A. You follow the river on up to West Tampa, and then it gets up to almost around Waters Avenue, and then it turns right and starts going basically east and through Temple Terrace, and then up and up and up, crosses Fletcher, up, and finally under I-75 to an area here where it goes through what's essentially a big flood holding area. And when the flood level reaches like 21 feet above mean sea level, they block the river automatically, and the water then flows down through the bypass canal all the way down to the Palm River, and then out into McCarthy Bay and into the bay itself. So essentially, it worked, and it allowed Tampa and people in the area to pretty much forget about the river, and that's what they did. They pretty well ignored it, except for the fact that it made a very convenient sewer line, so that all kinds of waste were then dumped into the river, and nobody gave it a second thought. So then we go up to essentially where it all begins, the Green Swamp. As I mentioned, it's a 900 square mile area to the east of Dade City. And it consists of wetlands and uplands. Some nice parks in the area if you like to do some camping or hiking. The thing that makes it so unusual is it's 132 feet above sea level, that area. So essentially it works like a huge water tower. It creates pressure for the numerous springs and river that then emanate from that area. So we have the Hillsborough River, the Peace, the Withlacoochee, and the Ocklawaha, all begin in the Green Swamp. Today, the Green Swamp is managed by the Southwest Florida Water Management District, which, if you've been in Tampa long, you know that that stands what is referred to as SWIFT, and it's an acronym that no one would ever figure out. But they're responsible now for the quality of water, plant life along the course of the whole river and green swamp area. Very important. So we end with this. The river is no longer forgotten. Did you ever think that the Stanley Cup and the Lombardi Trophy would ride down the Hillsborough River? No way. The river now is essentially the western anchor of downtown Tampa. And as the city expands over the next few decades, the river will become the centermost feature of our city. So that concludes our little talk about the river. There are many, many other secrets that you can find out about at the Tampa Bay History Center. Visit us anytime. See what those secrets and other not so secret things are all about. We're located right by the Amity Arena and the River Walk, a very convenient walk. So Chris, back to you.
All right. I'm going to come back on here, and Clete, if you want to turn your camera back on.
Okay.
We do have some questions coming in here. Someone was wanting to clarify, I guess they couldn't hear, what was the meaning of the pest house?
The pest house was in fact a pestilence house. And the phraseology, I thought, well, that was just what the neighborhood people called it, the pest house. But then in reading the quote from the city council meeting, they referred to it as the pest house. And then I came across where a New York Times article was referring to a pest house in Jacksonville. So it was very much a common phrase, a phraseology at the time. But the folks who had some disease that they wanted to try to isolate.
Okay. Someone is asking, you covered a lot of different areas, and they were wondering if mostly all of them, if not all of them, are still open to be visited by the public, like Sulfur Springs and the Green Swamp area. Are those open for public access?
Well, in the case of Sulfur Springs, it's not, part of it is fenced off, but other parts you can wander around in between Florida Avenue and Nebraska Avenue. Of course, that place where the pest house was is now a park, so that's certainly very accessible. And if you just drive around Seminole Heights and sort of be alert to look around as you pass the residential streets, you'll frequently see where there are slabs of concrete in the side yards, the backyards. And those are actually springs that have been capped. There was a very large ice house right in that area too, a block or two from the river. But another place where there's a spring, if you want to get a feeling for how it would look, is if you go up to where Florida Avenue crosses the river, the street on the south side of the bridge, you hung the left and went west. You just go about a block and there's a little spring in there that's still maintained by the city. In fact, over the years, it was a place that was just teeming with Indian artifacts. So it was a campground at one time.
Okay.
I might just mention one other, which I didn't include today because of the time limitations, but Eulalie Spring, which you're probably all familiar with, was probably the second most important spring in the area. And of course, it's very accessible now. But for many years, it was just covered and littered with junk and weeds. And it was not an area you can spend too much time in. But now with the restoration of the waterworks building there, by the Gons Mark. It's just a very lovely place to visit.
All right. Looks like we have time for one more question. Someone's asking if the Tampa Bay History Center offers any historic tours of the river, or do you know of any local companies that do that?
I'm not familiar with it, but that's not to say it doesn't happen. I know that that's something that you could follow up on at the History Center, but I'm not aware of any. But I would suppose now with all the water taxis that might be an option.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for questions. Cleet, thank you very much for your presentation. Always appreciative of Tampa Bay History Center and all the history and knowledge that you all share with the general public. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my screen here and put up our closing slide. If you'd like to contact the library, you can call the number here on our screen at 813-273-3652 or go online at hcplc.org/contact. Also on our website, you can share your story, how the library's impacted your life, and you can also access our calendar of events to find out about virtual and in-person programming. All right, well, with that, I will say thank you to you, Cleet. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for the great presentation. And thank you everyone who came and attended this afternoon. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.